Welcome to On and Off the Mic with Mike Gorman.
I grew up in New England, so I've been cheering for Boston sports my whole life. I was a huge Boston Celtics and Larry Bird fan growing up. So 7 years ago, when I was working at the Olympics and I saw that Mike Gorman was going to be there, I was excited. He's been the voice of the Boston Celtics on TV for almost 40 years. It was a pleasure to meet him back then and get to know him. He's a great guy with some amazing stories and some really good advice. Here's our conversation. How was the season? I know it didn't turn out the way we wanted. I'm obviously a huge Celtics fan growing up in New England, and you've been doing it for so many years now. But what was the take after all that this past year?
One would like to forget, move on, possible. The chemistry was just never there. You know, for half the season, you kind of hoped it was developing, and then for the second half of the season, you realized it wasn't. And instead of kind of maintaining a status quo, it actually got worse as time went on. They just, Kyrie was just a square peg that they were trying to put into a round hole, and it just wasn't going to work out. And so I don't foresee, just despite the things that happened last night that I think changed the free agent market considerably, I don't see Kyrie coming back to Boston.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the take for a while. I mean, it's crazy. The year before, they actually seemed to play better, you know, when they had all the injuries and everything. I mean, wasn't that was pretty amazing. They almost pulled it off.
Yeah, they did play better. They were much more fun team to watch. The thing that unfortunately turned out with this team is they became very unlikable. And that became more and more obvious. There was more booing in the Boston Garden this year than I've heard in my career. People got tired of the act about 40 games in and wanted people to step up and be what they said they were going to be. I mean, Kyrie had stated all along he wanted to go to a team where he could be the guy. Well, the Celtics took him and told him, "You're the guy." And he didn't particularly like the role once he had it. So be interesting to see what he does now, whether or not he's willing to go back to being second fiddle to LeBron in LA or to a Kevin Durant in New York.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking, like, when you go back and, you see like a guy like Brad Stevens and all that he did, from college and then comes to the NBA. What's your take and your personal connection with him? Because I know all we see is just kind of that stoic look on the sidelines and people are like, show some more emotion. What's the deal? I mean, that's who he is, right? I mean, what's your take with Brad?
Yeah, it is very much who he is. I'm very impressed with Brad. I think I want to stick around for a few more years because I think Brad will win a championship for the next 2 or 3 years. He's that good a coach. He's a better human being than he is a coach. The Celtics were very fortunate to get him, and I think barring something completely unforeseen, I think he's a Celtic coach for a long time to come. That said, there were some guys last year. I don't think Kyrie bought into the program, and I think other players on the team found their roles changed decisively from the year before, a year in which they went to the fourth quarter of the seventh game of the Eastern Conference Finals and were that close to going to the finals. Then all of a sudden they come back 3 months later, and the guys that were the number 1, 2, and 3 options were now suddenly the 3, 4, and 5 options on plays, and that didn't sit very well, and they were never able to recover and get any chemistry. But I don't blame that on Brad Stevens. I mean, I think Brad very much takes the stance that these are no longer college kids. These are young men, and you treat them like young men, and you expect them to act like young men. And some guys didn't last year.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about, the kind of the way he goes about his style and coaching, it's almost a little like a Bill Belichick, right? I mean, you look at him on the sidelines and he doesn't always get too excited or too crazy, but I think that's helpful. I don't know. I want to get your take on that. Like, and just in general, like if you go nuts and you're acting like going berserk, maybe your players act that way too. But if you're over there calm on the sidelines and trusting what they do, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like you almost want to, play more for somebody like that than you do with a guy who's screaming and yelling at you, whether that's a coach or a friend or a family member, right? I mean, would it come across better,
No offense to Bill Belichick, but Brad is a lot more friendly and open than
Okay,
Bill.
Yeah.
Bill's press conferences are legendary for the number of monosyllabic answers he gives to very lengthy questions.
Right.
Brad's not like that. Brad will look you in the eye and try to explain what your question is, answer your question completely. Brad's one in a million, I think. So he's just the thing is, and I'd be curious what you thought of this, Mike. And you've done NBA, and you've done professional, and you've done college sports, and the big thing I find, especially in basketball, that in college the team takes on the personality of the head coach.
Right.
In the pros, the team takes on the personality of the best player. And the best player for the Celtics this year was a guy who was kind of confused and didn't know whether he wanted to be there or not. And that filtered down through the whole group. And so what I think the Celtics need to do is have more of an Al Horford as the role model and the best player on the, if not the best player on the court, the best all-around player when you take into locker room leadership and other things under consideration. It's got to be more like an Al Horford than it needs to be a Kyrie Irving, because Kyrie really is kind of a loner. And it's tough to be the leader of the team when you're not there.
You're absolutely right. I totally agree with that 100%. You're right. You talk about them being young men, and you got to look around, and everybody's grown up. They've been there. So they're looking for who's the leader on the court and who's going to – yeah, you're absolutely right. And then in college, you're trying to get to that next level, so you're going toward the coach. You're trying to do what the coach wants, and you're looking over at him. And I've seen it. I've done a lot of teams and a lot of games where the coach is out of control and doing this and that. Sometimes the players act that way too. You do. You look over on the sidelines and you almost kind of wonder, you can almost tell how the team is playing. I remember back in the day, like if you get like a technical foul, like you can't get that every other game. It kind of loses its luster, right? you get it once in a while, and then the team gets fired up. And if you get one every game, it's like, well, here we go again. So.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Exactly right. And coaches in college control minutes. And coaches in the pros don't control minutes all that much. And minutes is a huge weapon. If you're a college coach, you just say, you do it my way or you sit down. You can't really tell Kyrie Irving, do it my way or you're going to sit down after they've just paid him $35 million to play or something like that. Yeah. So you have different rules in the pros. But I think Brad has made that transition very well. And I think we're going to go back to play into his strength, which is, as opposed to trying to get a superstar in here, use your draft picks wisely, get coachable kids, and let Brad do his thing. That's what I think you're going to see out of the Celtics over the next 2 years.
Join our friends from the Delaware Kids Fund and Harvey Hanna and Associates for the 10th Annual Delaware Kids Fund 5K in Newport, Delaware on Saturday, August 3rd to help fight childhood hunger. To register and for full info, visit dekidsfund.org.
I always remember, because we talked a while ago. We met a while back doing the Olympics, actually, which is a lot of fun. And hopefully we'll be back on again next summer. I know you're doing basketball. I was doing field hockey. And, I loved your story about, where you got to and how you become the Celtics broadcaster. I mean, everybody kind of has like their own war story, in this business. Like there's no way to do it. I'm sure you've had a lot of people asking you for advice over the years and how to get there. But, what do you say when everybody's got a different path, And I loved your story. If you could kind of bring that back, working with Tommy Heinsohn, right, and doing college games back in the day and the network. How did all that transpire, to where you got to today?
Yeah, the thing I try to tell anybody who asks me for advice is try as hard as you can to be in the right place at the right time. And that so much it describes our business. And for me, I had just got the job in Providence as the weekend 6 and 11 o'clock guy after having done a morning show in Providence for about 2 years. And part of that package with the television station was they had 5 Providence college games that they could televise. And so I obviously wanted to televise them. And then the Monday through Friday guy got a job at Orlando and he left. And so I ended up being the main guy at Channel 12 in a space of about a month. I went from the radio guy to the weekend guy to the main guy in about 30 days. And so I inherited the 5 play-by-play job gigs with Providence College. And Dave Gavitt was the coach at the time. And I meet Dave Gavitt. I become friends with Dave, and I do the games. Next thing you know, the Big East comes along. Dave needs somebody to do the Big East. I do some Big East games. Celtic people notice me, and I get a job doing the Celtic home games. When Prism, which doesn't exist anymore, was the first of one of the pay-per-view outfits, was just doing Celtic home games. So I would do the Celtic home games, and then when I didn't do the home games, I was off, so they were on the road. I'd do the Big East. So I just was lucky enough to be in the right place when Larry Bird was with the Celtics, and the likes of Patrick Ewing and Chris Mullin and Pearl Washington and on goes the list, were in their heyday in the Big East. So at one point I was doing an average of, I would literally do 8 games a week, because I do 2 games on Saturday. I do a regional broadcast at noontime and then drive from, say, Connecticut to Seton Hall and do a Seton Hall game that night. So, yeah, I was just in the right place at the right time, Michael, and was able to capitalize on it. And here I am 37 years later doing the same job.
Yeah, man, like, look at you doing the double headers. I didn't, I thought there was a lot of games to be had. That's pretty crazy.
That was great. That was great. The Celtics would play in the old days. The Celtics schedule was very predictable because of the Bruins. And so Celtics would play Wednesday and Friday at home and Sunday afternoon on national TV at a time when national TV didn't have exclusive rights, so you could also do the game. So I would do the Celtics on Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday, and I'd stay overnight at the airport on Friday night in Boston. I'd get an early morning flight to, say, Syracuse, do a noontime game at Syracuse, get a 2:30 and 3 o'clock flight out of Syracuse back to LaGuardia, then go do St. John's, and then get a flight that same night back to Boston, and then do the Celtics again the next day. And it sounds like it was a crazy schedule, but as you remember, Mike, you're a little kid watching these, but as you remember, those buildings were electric. They were sold out. The Celtics sold out every home game. And I'd go to do Syracuse, Georgetown, and 28,000 people in the Carrier Dome. And then on Tuesday night, I'd go down to Villanova, and there were like 15,000 people in the Spectrum. And then Wednesday night, I'm back with the Celtics. And Thursday night, I'm at Pittsburgh, and the Civic Arena is full because Georgetown's in town. So you couldn't get tired, because as soon as you walked in the building, you got jacked up because you knew it was going to be a great game. And I'm working with the likes of Bill Raftery and Ronnie Perry, and they were really good guys, real pros in what they did. So the job was easy. I was stealing like for years.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love hearing that, because like everybody can relate to those people and those atmospheres. And did you ever have any travel issues though? I mean, everything kind of worked out according to plan. I just heard that like schedule, and it's like, were you ever freaked out that like the flight was going to be delayed, or you didn't get your car or the ride over there in time, or traffic? Work out.
I got there a few times just in time to sit down for the opening tip. But I don't recall ever really missing any games because of it. You know, it's funny, if back in those days, I hate to sound like the old guy talking about the good old days, but you had Eastern Airlines, you had a bunch of other, US Air had a ton of flights. So you could go Pittsburgh to Providence 3 different times a day on direct flights. So it wasn't that hard to really do the scheduling, and there weren't that many people traveling at 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon from Syracuse to Philadelphia, say. So you jump on a relatively empty seated plane and fly for an hour and a half and go do another game.
That's awesome.
No, it was fun. I was single at the time, so it was a good life. I didn't have any responsibilities that I had to live up to. So yeah, those were good days, Michael. Those were good days.
No, it is. No, I'm gonna join you with the saying of the good old days, because you're right. I was a little kid, and I was watching the games back in the day, but I loved it. I mean, the NBA, for me as a kid growing up, and for you doing the games back in the early, well, I'd say mid '80s. I'm probably like 8 or 9 at that point, but you knew it. Like, you knew every team had an identity, right? I mean, and the players stayed the same year after year. I mean, there's the Pistons with Dumars and Lambeer and Isaiah Thomas, and then you had the Bulls. Obviously, you had the Lakers with, of course, Magic and Worthy, and then the Celtics and everybody, Barkley, and everybody kind of stayed the same, right? I mean, wasn't it so much fun going up against those teams year after year? Maybe they'd add a guy or two, but it wasn't the way it is today, where it's like a pickup league and everybody just picks their players and people get traded every single second. Like, it was so much
No,
fun.
you're exactly right, Mike, because you really didn't have to do a whole lot of homework because you probably saw these guys 4 days ago. It was Boston stayed fairly stable, and as time went by, I started in 1980 with the Celtics, and I think it was like 78 or so. I was doing a lot of college basketball for Providence College and then the Big East, and so I got to know these guys. Like Ray Allen and I became friends when he was a freshman at UConn. So
Right.
By the time he got to the pros, I had known him for 4 years. So that happened a lot with Chris Mullen, Patrick Ewing, all guys whose entire college career I did a lot of their games. So I got to know them on that level. And then all of a sudden they're the key guys in the pros. So I didn't have to do much homework on Patrick Ewing the first time he walked out there as a Knick. I probably had done 20 of his college games. So that was fun. The overlap between the two was really fun. And it made my job pretty easy. I got to know guys. If you get to know guys in college, it's a lot easier than getting to know them in the pros.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, you've been able to kind of create like your own identity. You know, that's what I love about like for how long you've been doing this, and you know, people know the players and they know what to expect there. They know what to expect from you, and you know, you come across as like, you know, as a friend, as a, you know, it's not like broadcasting. You know what I mean? I know you are, but it's like it's just different. You know, I mean, you have one of those kind of deliveries that you know. I appreciate, I enjoy, I like watching, you know, and obviously the fans have for how long you've been doing it. I mean, does that feel good to be able to know that and to be yourself and just to do what you do and not have to kind of answer per se to, you know, people about it?
Yes, very much so. I stopped trying to cover up my accent about 20 years ago now. But for the first 15 or 16 years, I kept trying to talk like a Midwesterner so I could get a job on CBS. And finally, I just said, screw it. I'm just going to be the guy from Dorchester. So that did allow me to relax a little bit. I tell this story a lot because it's true. The first game I ever did with Tommy Heinsohn was I had done a couple of college games with him, but the first pro game I did, I had this elaborate board set up in front of me, Mike. I had multicolored, you know, every stories about players, how many people were in their families, how many sisters and brothers they had, where they went to school, who their coach was, who they hung out with. I just had all this information in 9 different colors, as you know, guys get carried away when they're putting their boards together. And I got it all spread out in front of me, and Tommy walks into the overhang in the old Boston Garden, which was a gondola that actually hung over the ledge of the first balcony, which is where we broadcast the games from. And he looks at the stuff in front of me and he says, "What's that blank?" And I said, "Those are my notes for the game." And he reaches over with one hand, he crumbles them up into a ball, and he throws them off the first balcony. And he said, "We don't need those notes. We're going to talk about what's happening in front of us." And that's what I've done for the last 38 years. I don't do notes anymore. I just kind of go out there and talk about what I see. And that makes for a more relaxed style. And it makes for also a less is better approach, which I've always taken. That I told Scal when I first started working with him, you have to pretend as a third man in the booth that you have to give time for them to talk. And that's helped him a lot. He doesn't feel like he has to fill up every second that I'm not talking. We have that third guy who says nothing.
That's a great point. I like that. I'm writing that down right now. Actually, you should say that because that's the person who just lets it breathe.
Yeah. And you'll find again you're much more in touch with the viewer when you're not trying to fill all 60 seconds of every minute, because the viewer is not. A lot of the guys in our business, from where I sit, Michael, forget it's television. People can see what's going on. You don't need to tell them again what's going on. You need to try to put yourself in the same position that they are and look at what they're seeing on the monitor and then maybe come at it from a different angle than the obvious. But it doesn't bother me at all. But Doc Emmerich is meant to do it. I've been watching a lot of hockey because of the Bruins. He's unbelievable. He is unbelievable. first of all, he knows every single guy on both teams when they all look alike to me. And
Right.
the hockey guys are up in the top of the balcony somewhere. They're a million miles from the ice. So how he's able to do what he's able to do, I have no idea. But he really does like a radio play-by-play for TV, and it's not offensive. But he might be the only guy in the business I can say that about.
Well, yeah, that's it. For some reason, hockey is the same on radio as it is on TV. To your point, I can see what's going on there too. I almost don't want to hear every single little pass, but the only time I do is, I guess, when Doc is doing the game. I'm like, he's so good, and his vocabulary is so amazing. Like, I don't think he ever says like the same word twice. I feel like, it's crazy.
Yeah, he has a great use of verbs. Guys glide around the ice. They slide. They just lots of. You know what I noticed the other night, Mike, which is really funny. He always calls the puck it. He never says puck. He always says they got it, we got it, he's got it. It's always it.
Never says
jumped out at me. I'm sorry.
I got to watch that and look for that too. He never says puck.
No.
Wow.
I mean, I won't say never. I won't say never, but for every time he says puck, he says it 25 times. Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, I'll have to. I'll watch out for that for sure. The next podcast. Yeah, he does. He just and then he transitions well. When he knows he wants to finish what he's saying or go on a break or the stoppage and play.
And you get the impression. I don't know, Doc, but you really get the impression that he's not trying to overwhelm you with look how much I know. He's trying to help you.
Yeah,
he's trying to help you see the game better.
Right.
And that's what a good play-by-play guy should be doing, especially a television play-by-play guy. I always tell analysts who I'm working with for the first time, it's when the ball's in play, you can watch the court. But as soon as the whistle, as soon as the ball stops being in play, you have to look at the monitor. Because no matter what you say, you should at least reference what the viewer is seeing. You might not want to actually talk about Doc Rivers at that moment. You might want to talk about somebody who took a bad shot 2 seconds ago, but you got to say if Doc Rivers is on the screen, Doc probably didn't like that shot from 2 minutes ago. Then you go talk about what you wanted, but at least you're acknowledging to the viewer you're looking at the same picture they are. Because I think too many color guys don't do that, and after a while, whether consciously or subconsciously, the viewer gets kind of put off by the fact that they're getting this input visually that is not being reinforced orally, and that's really what the analyst's job is.
Yeah, I'm with you because that's when your guys in the truck and the producer and the director, they got a little bit more chance to cut around and start to show other stuff, and that's where you work together. I mean, they can go somewhere and you got to follow them, or you're saying something and they got to follow you, but a lot of that happens when it's a dead ball.
Yep, without question.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's I love this business because you and I and many of the broadcasters that do this, we understand kind of what goes on and what goes into it. The average fan at home is just kind of watching the game, and they don't know, but they shouldn't know. They don't need to know. It's like when you go to the restaurant, right? You just want your steak and whatever you ordered. You don't care what goes on in the kitchen, behind the scenes with the cook and everybody else. You just want your steak, and the cook doesn't come out and go, "Hey, do you know what I had to go through to get this steak to you? Bobby was being a whatever, and the potatoes were late, and the server wasn't helping me." You don't hear any of that. You just here comes your meal. It's like what we do. So did you? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, back real quick to the Tommy Heinsohn thing. Did you freak out when he threw all your notes? I mean, you had all the players and everybody listed there too. What did you literally do after that? Because they're crumpled up and they're.
I grabbed a program that my stat guy had beside him, and opened it to the page that had both rosters on it, and just did the game.
And how did it go
I've been very fortunate, and the value of this. There's a fellow named Dick Life who works at Bentley College here, which is his main job in Boston. But he has been my stat guy for 39 years. And he might be, of all the places I've worked at ESPN, NBC, CBS for short periods of time in all of those places. But I've worked with them all, and never have I come across a stat guy who's anywhere near can carry this guy's bag. So he bails me out. I mean, on Celtic games, conservatively, he's responsible for 70% of what I say on the air. By just constantly firing me little notes about players, about, he's missed his last 4 shots. If whatever it is he sees that's interesting, he just scribbles on a piece of paper and fires at me. And by the end of the game, I have like 50 or 60 of these little pieces of paper spread all over in front of me. So he bailed me out on that game and has bailed me out with Tommy for the last 37 years now.
That's awesome. No, you got to have a good guy like that. And, but for you in doing professional, I feel like it is a little, it's a little different, right? I mean, the guys. Even as a fan, they know everybody. You know what I mean? Like you don't need to hear about so-and-so's background or sister or brother, unless there's a great story or something that just came up or you got to talk about. I mean, it's like you can kind of go in there with a different mindset. For some reason, when we're doing college or stuff like that, you almost feel like, I don't know, you want to give a little bit more, or sometimes you have to, but I've dialed it back too, to your point. It's like people don't want to hear about all that stuff sometimes. They just want to watch the game, right? I mean, for the most part.
And nobody stumbles on us anymore. I mean, like in the old days when you had 3 network stations and 2 UHF stations, and that was all you got on your TV set, you only had 5 choices. So maybe you did stumble on a basketball game if there was one on and stayed with it and you hadn't planned to. But in the day and age that we live in now, with literally thousands of choices that people can watch, the people who are watching that game know all that stuff that we just talked about. They know the story of how the kid got to the school or how the kid's doing. They want to know how he's doing tonight. So you become you live much more in the present. I remember when I did some games for CBS, this one producer at CBS, who I'll leave nameless, used to make the color guy come up with 5 stories on every player and put them on a 3x5 card. And then during the game, he'd do, all right, do Larry Bird number 3 right now. That's what I'd hear in the headset. And I'd watch the color guy like fumble through his cards to get to number 3. And it was so stupid, but it was the belief on the network's part at that time that people who had nothing to do on a Sunday afternoon all of a sudden sat down, turned on the TV and said, hey, Mary, let's watch the Lakers and Celtics. And that's what they believed. So they had to treat this guy like he knew nothing. And what I find out is people talk about you, me, any other people, and they say, this guy's really good and this guy's really bad. And usually when they say this guy's really bad, it's because he talks too much. That's usually the number one. That's the number one complaint. Is he's trying to get too much information out. It's kind of like being Dick Vitale. He's just going to just bury you with all this useless information.
Yeah, it is. It is. I've done a bunch of games with so many different analysts, over the years. And, I'll call my parents usually after the games just to, say hello because they always watch. And, my dad, he always say, most of the time he'll go, hey, how did you like working with so-and-so? I'm like, no, he was good. And then he followed up with, yeah, but he talked a lot. That would be his thing. He talked a lot. I'm like, yeah, you're right, Dad. He did.
That's because your dad wanted to hear his son's voice. He didn't want to hear
right.
Gallagher.
Yeah, you're not gonna hear me more than that.
He's just being a good dad. That's all.
He is, yeah, he is. I say, and I say that to people too, and I look for, a little advice or, things I could do a little bit differently. I say, hey, I got my mom and dad to tell me I'm good. You tell me, what we could do better, So, hey, that's great stuff, man. I always love talking to you about all this and, reminiscing about these games and these stories. And hey, looking forward to next season. But hey, enjoy the off season, right? You get a little chance to relax this summer, right?
Play a little golf almost every day. It's not raining.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Well, hey, great stuff. And I'll let you run with Mike. Great talking to you. Thanks again. And hopefully we'll see you soon.
Okay, Michael. See you in the fall.
All right, you got it.
Make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss another episode. And you can follow Mike's travels all year long on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and on the web at Mike Corey Sports.